the next thing I want to talk about is how you actually can change the depth of this extrusion. Well, to do that, instead of over here in the 3D panel, instead of choosing current scene, I want to choose my mesh. Right here it's called base mountain shape copy. All right, that's, if I were to pull this out further, well, actually it's not. Anyway, it's not telling me, but this is a mesh, okay? And so it's that's my whole object, and my object, you'll notice, is based on, if I scroll, pull this out, you'll see that it says front inflation material, front bevel material, extrusion material, bevel material. So those are your faces, okay? Those are going to be the things that, let's drag that back over. Those are going to be the things that you apply materials to, right? And if you wanted to see what it looked like for instance, if I turn the eye off of that, you lose that front material that has the mask on it. And so that kind of gives you an idea that that in fact is just something that's flat. It looks like it has depth to it, but it's just basically showing the mask. But if I were to go and apply some sort of material to it that is, if I click on the actual face, you see contextually up here in properties, it shows me different materials that I can apply to it. All right. And it's going to start off with this initial one that basically is a non-material. All right. So it's going to give me some basic things that I can apply. And you could, for instance, this will sort of make it look like an aluminum polka dotted thing, right? But it's got some hollows, for instance. This sort of looks like whatever that is, some kind of stone, or to me it reminds me of like the outside of a walnut. Or leather or something. And so this is like green glass, so it's transparent, you can see through it. So some of these are kind of interesting. And then, depending on how you apply your other faces, so let's come down here and apply some other faces. Like if you were to apply the whole thing as green glass, then you're going to end up with something that's sort of strange looking, especially whenever there's nothing else in the scene. So this doesn't really come with a whole lot of really great textures. It's really not that wonderful, to be honest. Like we could give it, this blue, something like that, sort of stone looking, I guess. But anyway, I'm going to show you how you can make your own material. But for right now, what you can do is just go ahead and play around with seeing like which ones of these faces are which, right? And so if you decided that you wanted to give, and I don't see which one that is, I'd probably have to orbit around to see where it is. I like using this polka dotted one because it really helps you understand very quickly where it's applying these faces, applying these materials to which faces. The other thing too, that you should notice about this one is that the way that this sort of wraps the extrusion, it's stretching it like you don't see it in circular format. So that would give you some kind of indication also of how strangely potentially that another material might be stretched as well. Like if you use a picture of a rock wall or something like that, it might sort of stretch the wall, stretch the rock texture so that it doesn't look natural. So there's some other issues with that, but this one I think is really good at illustrating that concept. And it's kind of interesting because you can also see through it as well. And here's what a lot of times will happen is people will go, oh, I want to move this around and orbit it. Well, if you just start grabbing your move tools right now, all right, if I do that, then if I click, I haven't moved it yet, but I clicked and it gave me these move options. That's because I currently was inside on a face of my mesh, of my base mountain shape copy, right? And so now it's prompting me to literally move it around. If I grab the head of this blue arrow, I can move it just on the Z-axis. So I can, move it with some kind of control. All right, I'm gonna come back here to history and I'm gonna undo that. If I wanted to move it up and down so that it comes up off the ground plane, you can see the what is that called, shadow down there moving too, then I can just pull this green head as well. And then it also allows me to rotate. You can see here it's giving me a chance to rotate with control as well. I'm going to jump backwards here. Okay, and then the same is going to be true for the red for the x-axis, right? Okay, and then you could, you know, make sure that it rotates on that, right? And so on. Okay, so take a second to kind of play around with that tool and just to get it to work properly. Now, the other thing I want to point out at this point so far is I want to show you, while I've got my base mountain shape copy selected, I'm going to collapse that. I can always get back to my faces this way, but just for the simplicity of this panel being easier to look at, I'm going to grab my whole object here, and then I'm going to go up to properties, and they have these things called shape presets, but first I want to pull my extrusion depth down because I don't really want that to be so far extruded out. All right, so let's do that. And then the other thing that I think that I would like to do is go ahead and make, I think that I'll go ahead and I'll make all of the faces have the same, here I'm going to just select them all with the shift key, have all the faces with the same texture. So I'll go and I'll pick that same texture like here. That's pretty dark. Ugh, that's pretty ugly. Okay. All right, these are, I'm trying to pick from the ones that you're going to have access to right off the bat. And this is one of the reasons that I'm showing you this actually too, like all these ugly textures, is because you're going to see why it's so advantageous to go and make your own material that you can apply. All right, let's just stick with that because we can see it pretty well. And I'll zoom in a little bit here. And so while that is that way, the other thing too that we can do is just choose your entire object, right? So choose the mesh, and then come up here where it says shape preset, and you can play around with different things like where it'll add a bevel to it, right? This will do some kind of like, it adds, I don't know, whatever you call those things, these little steps. This one has like a soft bevel, sort of like a pillow. This is the, I think the actual thing is called pillow. This one will make something that's flat that feels like it's puffed out. This is actually pretty nice for, not for this brand I don't think, but I think it would be really nice for a lot of people's. And then this one is actually pretty interesting too, because if you, let's jump back down here, and I'm going to grab my current view so that I can orbit around, and if you can see the way, if I look over here, it's sort of like sucks in over here. So it's actually like sucking the face in a little bit in 3D. It's kind of interesting, actually. Maybe not so good for what I'm doing, but it could have its really interesting potential uses. And then there, you start getting a little bit crazier with these other things, and like there are twirls, and it starts doing insane stuff that you probably aren't going to use right off the bat. So I would stick to something that's a little more conventional. For me, I'm going to try to use this bevel and see if I can play with it. Okay, so I want to go over here. There is, while I've got this selected, if you look up here, there's another button that you can choose, and it allows you to adjust the extrusion depth, right? And I think that I want to do that here. And then it does allow you to twist it if you want. I think that it gets pretty crazy. It's not something that I want to do. So I'm going to put this back to 0 degrees like that. And then you can also, here, I guess I'll hit enter. And then you can taper, right? And it does this kind of like perspective like thing where it tapers it in or out. I'm not going to do that either, but it might be useful for what you want to do. So anyway, I just assume, oh, it's actually 100%. I just want to show you these so you can mess around with them. But this one's actually pretty cool. If you click over here, it allows you to adjust the front, the back, or the front and back. And so what I'm going to do is you can actually change like the angle of this and turn the strength up so that you can you can actually start to effectively create like actual texture that extrudes out, or in, I should say, right? But it can actually grow out of the shape. And so you probably don't want it to be too dramatic. I would imagine that you would want it to be a little bit dramatic if you think that you actually even want to do this. But it's really good on irregular shapes, I think, especially because then it will start to push and pull them in different ways, right? And then you can grab these things and adjust them as well. And then that kind of will show the angle of the bevel. All right, and then you might actually be able to, if you come back to your current view so that you can move around, you can actually see that it added dimension and volume so that this is like sticking out. It didn't do it so much for the bottom portion down here because these are such regular shapes. I mean, it did pull them out so that they have a sharp taper, but up here it actually pulled it out so it has like a thickness to it, and it might be a little bit too thick, but I just wanted to show you that you can do that as well. In the next video, I'm going to show you how you can make your own material.